Hello everyone and welcome to the Reddit Railway. My name is Victor and I'll be your driver. Today's destination is r/MaliciousCompliance, so all aboard! I used to work in a small office area and we had a simple coffee setup for those who like to drink coffee during the workday. There was a list, and when the current coffee supply was running low, the next person on the list would bring in a bag of coffee for the office. There were 10 or so people on the list, meaning one person would have to bring in coffee every other month. It had worked rather well and everyone was happy with the setup. Enter Coffee Karen. When it was her turn, she brought in a pound of coffee from some local hipster bar. It was good coffee and everyone commented on her selection. This was high-end designer coffee and cost around $20 a pound. When that coffee runs out, the next person on the list decides they didn't want to be outdone and got a pound from a different bar with a similar price point. Again, good coffee and everyone comments on that person's selection. Then it's my turn to bring in coffee. While I do enjoy a fancy cup of joe, I bring in a regular bag that costs around $6 at the grocery store. About an hour later, Coffee Karen comes storming up to my desk with my bag of coffee in her hand like it was roadkill she found on her way to work. She has the bag pinched between two fingers and is holding it in my face. She asks, "Did you bring this shit?" I reply, "Yeah, it was my turn to bring coffee." She snaps, "We don't drink this crap anymore." She drops it on my desk and sneers at me. "You had better go someplace for good coffee or we are going to cut you off," and she walks away. Okay then, I'll do as you say. After work I take my coffee and go home. I pass by a coffee house and go in. It was a nice place. It was designed like a bar, but it served coffee instead of alcohol. I ordered a house coffee and was able to talk to the barista, as I was the only one in the place not glued to a phone. I told him what happened at work and what I was planning to do. I was going to get a pound of his coffee, take it home, keep the good stuff, and put the crap coffee in his bag. The barista, who turned out to be the owner, laughed and said he loved the idea. So I get a pound of the house coffee and he throws in a few extra empty bags, saying, "Keep going with it, man. I like the idea." The next day I bring in my pound of crap coffee in the bag from the bar and everyone is telling me how great it is. Coffee Karen comes up to me and says, "Now isn't this better than the shit you brought yesterday? Never bring in cheap coffee again." I agree and tell her that the coffee from the bar was amazing. I just failed to mention what kind of coffee was actually in the bag. Later in the week I go back to the coffee bar and find the guy to tell him what happened. He loves it and said when I ran out of bags to come back in and get more from him. I asked him why he was supporting my crap coffee in his packaging and he said, "Well, they don't know good coffee from crap coffee, right? So they may come in here and get my good coffee and decide to get more of it. Free advertising for me." It must have worked out for him because I saw a few of his coffee cups at work over the next few months. As for me, I got to wake up every morning to a nice cup of coffee. This reminds me of an experiment that was conducted a few years ago. They got several empty bottles of high quality wine and filled it with cheaper stuff. Several connoisseurs were brought in to sip the wine to see if anyone would notice, and none of them did. This story is an exact parallel to that. All that fancy food and drink is just rubbish. It's all a facade. And if anyone has a problem with something you like just because it's cheap, tell them to get stuffed. Or tell them, "Fuck you, Karen." I'm sure that'll work too. I used to work in the claims department for one of the top auto insurance companies in America. I get a phone call from a lawyer looking to file a new accident claim for his client. His client is also my customer. I explained that I can take the initial report from the lawyer, but will be contacting the client to get his side of the story. The lawyer immediately tells me that I am not to contact the client because he is being represented by him. I explain that until I have an official letter of representation on file, I have every right to contact the client. So anyway, I proceed to gather all the details from the lawyer. Once I finish filing the claim, I generate a claim number and give it to the lawyer. The lawyer was stalling me a little bit and I soon realized why. He was using the time to get an official letter of representation on file so I couldn't contact his client. Now I'm unable to speak with the client without his lawyer's permission. The lawyer was a pompous ass and was definitely trying to throw his weight around. He proceeds to tell me that his client has minor injuries such as back and neck pain and is going to see a doctor. I explained it would be best if we contact his doctor of choice as soon as possible so we can start using the coverage to pay for his medical bills. The lawyer gets all huffy with me and tells me his client will get all the medical help he needs, and once it's done, he will send us a bill that we will be required to pay in full. I explain it doesn't work that way. Some doctors require certain payments from insurance companies up front, or to at least contact the insurance company to confirm certain payments will be paid. I also explained the client only had a certain amount of coverage that he pays for. We are not required as an insurance company to pay more than what the client has on his policy. For example, if the client has $10,000 in coverage, that's all we would pay. pay, even if the medical bill was $20,000. I also explained that if the doctor hasn't been in contact with an insurance company, they may charge the client, and the client will have to go through a different, longer process for us to reimburse him than if we just paid the doctor up front. I know this sounds like a bunch of corporate BS, and it is, but I don't make the rules. I'm really trying my hardest to make this as easy as possible for the client, but the lawyer just isn't having it. He asserts his client will go to whatever doctor he wants to receive treatment, that we will pay for it in full, and his client will pay nothing. I went back and forth with the lawyer, but since we kept going in circles, it was time to just take the loss. So I do, and we move on to the vehicle. The client apparently drove the vehicle from the accident straight to the lawyer's office. The windshield was damaged and there was some fluids leaking from the car. I recommended that we tow the vehicle to a repair shop. I explained the customer had towing coverage and we can get a tow truck free of charge. The lawyer refuses and says the client can drive the car. The lawyer also demands that the client use a repair shop of his choice. I explained to the lawyer that the client is absolutely allowed to use a shop of his choice, but that we had to send an adjuster out to the car to inspect the damage and give a quote to the repair shop. The reason we did this is a lot of times body shops will take advantage of insurance companies. They fix things that don't need to be fixed and purposely buy more expensive parts to hike up the price. It's pretty much insurance fraud, so we usually send out our own expert to assess the damage and write up a fair and legit repair estimate. The lawyer refuses and says he isn't telling us which shop the car is going to. Once again, we will get a bill when the work is done and we will pay for it in full. I explain we don't cover the cost of aftermarket parts, only factory parts. It is listed in our contract. The customer agreed to this when he signed up. Once again, corporate BS I know, but I don't make the rules, and I really am trying to help the client out here so he doesn't have a bunch of unnecessary crap to deal with. I argued with his lawyer for a long time about how things work, and the way he was trying to handle this was going to end up costing the client money. The lawyer wasn't having any of it. He threatened to sue and all that crap. I finally gave in and let the lawyer do whatever he wanted. I knew the worst would come of this. In the end, I decided to let the lawyer and client feel the consequences of their stupid decisions. I let them do what they thought was best. I mean, why listen to the professional, right? What ends up happening is the client takes the car to some sketchy shop. They do exactly what we feared and jack the price way up. They put expensive aftermarket replacement parts on the car which we don't cover. The customer had to pay out of pocket for a bunch of stuff. They took longer than 30 days to repair his car because the longer they have it, the more they can charge. We only covered 30 days for a rental car, so the client ends up paying out of pocket for that too. Also, the client had to pay some out of pocket expenses for his doctor. We ended up reimbursing him for the doctor's bills, but it was a long drawn out process and very frustrating. We did not reimburse him for some of the expenses at the body shop. This amounted to more than $1,000. In the end, the customer had a ton of expenses and headaches to deal with, all because of his asshole lawyer. What a nong! Did the lawyer think he was helping his client by standing up to the big bad insurance company? Or was he just so eager to show off the size of his dick that his client's welfare wasn't a factor? Either way, this moron deserves to be disbarred. It must have been so frustrating for OP knowing what was going to happen. It must also be frustrating because, by their own admission, a lot of their work is tangled up in corporate BS. Nobody likes hearing that. Still, it must have been satisfying knowing you were right, OP. Hopefully, that was the last time you had to deal with an obnoxious lawyer. Anyway, we've come to the end of our journey. Thank you for traveling on the Reddit Railway, and we hope to see you again soon.